You explained yourself again, didn't you? You sat there, or maybe you were standing, or maybe you were driving home alone at night, replaying the whole conversation in your head, and you went through it all again. Every word, every reason, every justification you gave to someone who had already decided what they were going to believe about you before you even opened your mouth. And the worst part? You knew it while it was happening. You felt it, that strange hollow feeling in your stomach that told you, this is not going to change anything. But you kept going, you kept explaining, because somewhere inside you, you still believed that if you just found the right words, if you just made them understand clearly enough, they would finally see you, they would finally get it, they would look at you and say, okay, I understand, you're right. They didn't say that, they never say that, and you walked away feeling smaller than you did before you started talking. That feeling, that specific feeling, is what this video is about. Not motivation, not a 5-step plan. This is about something that has been happening to you your entire life, and nobody ever gave it a name. Nobody ever sat you down and said, every time you explain yourself to someone who doesn't deserve that explanation, you are handing them a piece of yourself that you are never getting back. Machiavelli watched kings fall. He watched powerful men get destroyed, not by armies, not by enemies, but by their own mouths, by their own need to be understood. He wrote in The Prince that the man who constantly justifies his actions to others has already surrendered his authority. Because the moment you start explaining, you are admitting, without saying it out loud, that their opinion of you is something you need to survive. And that is the moment everything shifts. Not in the room, in you. Because people don't attack what they respect. They attack what they sense is available to be attacked. And when you start explaining yourself, when you start laying out your reasons and your feelings and your intentions like evidence at a trial, you are not defending yourself. You are showing them exactly where to hit you next time. This is not about becoming cold. This is not about becoming someone who doesn't care. This is about something much more powerful than that. This is about becoming someone who knows their own worth so completely, so quietly, so deeply, that no misunderstanding in the world can shake it. Someone who can be misread, misquoted, misunderstood, and still wake up the next morning completely intact. 6 points. 6 things that have happened to you. 6 moments where you shrunk yourself down to fit into someone else's comfort. After today, you stop shrinking. Drop in the comments right now. I owe nothing. Now let's begin. Point 1. Every time you explain yourself, you are giving them the weapon. Nobody is born knowing how to hurt you perfectly. They learn, they study, and the most dangerous teacher they ever had was you. Every time you sat down and explained yourself, every time you said, I did it because, or you have to understand that I was feeling, you were not defending yourself. You were giving them a guided tour of your insecurities. You were showing them which rooms inside you are unlocked. You were telling them, without realizing it, exactly what matters to you. Exactly what you're afraid of losing, and exactly what kind of words will make you fall apart the next time they need you to. And they remembered. People always remember what breaks you. Machiavelli said it plainly. A prince who reveals his fears to his enemies has not shown courage. He has shown them the exact location of the gate. And once they know where the gate is, they will come back to it. Every single time. You have experienced this. You explained yourself once to someone. You were honest, you were vulnerable, you laid it all out. And for a moment it felt like connection. It felt like they finally understood you. But then weeks later, or months later, or maybe the very next day, they used exactly what you said, not to hurt you clumsily. Precisely, like someone who had been holding the key the whole time and was just waiting for the right moment to use it. That was not a coincidence. That was the inevitable result of explaining yourself to someone who was never actually trying to understand you. They were cataloging you. Here is what nobody tells you. Silence is not the absence of a response. Silence is the most complete response you can give. When you say nothing, when you do not rush to fill the space with justifications and explanations and emotional confessions, you force the other person to sit with their own assumptions. You give them nothing to work with, nothing to twist, nothing to come back and use against you 6 months from now when you least expect it. Your silence does not make you guilty. Your silence makes you untouchable. And untouchable is exactly what you need to become. Point 2. You were never defending yourself. You were begging. For someone to look at the version of you, for someone to look at the version of you that you know exists. The real one, the one with the actual intentions, the one who didn't mean it the way it came out, and choose that version instead of the one they had already decided on. And begging, no matter how articulate, no matter how calm, no matter how reasonable it sounds, is still begging. You know the feeling, that thing that happens in your body when you are mid-explanation and you realize it is not landing. The other person's face doesn't change, or worse, they cross their arms, or worse than that, they start nodding in that slow, patient way that means they have completely stopped listening and are just waiting for you to finish so they can say what they already decided to say. And you keep going anyway. You go deeper, you give more detail, you become more desperate without even raising your voice. That desperation is visible. It is radiating off you, and every second of it is quietly, invisibly destroying how they see you. Machiavelli observed something that has never stopped being true. People do not grant respect to those who ask for it. They grant it to those who never seem to need it in the first place. Because respect, real respect, is not something that gets transferred through explanation or argument. It is something that gets felt, and it gets felt through stillness, through the quiet confidence of someone who does not need the room's permission to know who they are. The people you genuinely respect in your life, the ones whose opinion actually carries weight. You did not respect them because they explained themselves to you perfectly. You respected them because they never seemed rattled, because when someone questioned them, they looked at that person with level eyes and kept moving. Because they gave off something wordless that said, "Believe me or don't, I'll still be here." That is not coldness. That is integrity in its most powerful form. Stop begging for what already belongs to you. Point 3. The people who demand explanations were never going to accept them anyway. Let's be honest about something that you already know, but keep refusing to accept. The people who push you the hardest for explanations are not confused. They are not genuinely trying to understand you. They are not sitting there with an open mind waiting for the right information to arrive so they can finally give you a fair judgment. They made their decision before they asked the question. The question was never a question. It was a trap with a polite face on it. You have been in this moment so many times. Someone comes to you already wound up, already decided, already carrying a conclusion they formed before the conversation even started. And they ask you to explain yourself. And you do. And they take everything you say and they fold it and bend it and press it into the shape of what they already believed. Your honesty becomes evidence against you. Your vulnerability becomes confirmation of their suspicion. Your attempt to be real with them becomes the exact thing they use to prove they were right about you all along. Nothing you said was ever going to change that. Not because you said it wrong, because the outcome was never in your hands. Machiavelli wrote that the wise man does not waste arrows on a wall that was built before the war began. There is a category of person in your life, and you know exactly who they are, for whom your explanation is simply the next chapter of the story they are already writing about you. And in that story, you are the villain. And the villain does not get to rewrite the script from inside the story. The only way to change that story is to stop participating in it entirely. Not with anger, not with a dramatic exit, just with the quiet, devastating decision to stop showing up to a court that was never going to rule in your favor. Stop submitting evidence to a judge who's already signed the verdict. Stop giving your time and your energy and your emotional honesty to someone who was always going to take it and walk away. Some people are not meant to understand you, and that is not your failure. That is just the truth. Let them be confused. Let them be wrong. Let them fill in the blanks with whatever they want. You know who you are. Point 4. Silence is not weakness. It is the most violent thing you can do to someone who wants a reaction. There is something nobody prepares you for. The first time you stay silent when every part of you is screaming to respond, it is going to feel unbearable. It is going to feel like losing, like cowardice, like you are letting them win by not saying anything. You're going to stand there, or sit there, or read that message on your phone, and feel this pressure building in your chest that says, say something. Defend yourself. They cannot just get away with that, and you are going to say nothing, and it is going to feel like dying a little. But here is what happens on the other side of that silence that nobody ever talks about. The other person, the one who said something unfair, the one who pushed you, the one who was waiting for you to erupt or collapse or beg, they do not feel victorious. They feel something far more uncomfortable than that. They feel ignored, not in the casual sense, in the deep, rattling sense. The kind that makes a person lie awake at night and replay the conversation wondering why you didn't react, wondering if maybe they misjudged you, wondering if maybe they are less important to you than they believed. Your silence does not say you have no response. Your silence says their behavior was not even worth one. That is annihilation. That is the most precise, surgical, bloodless way to communicate that someone does not hold power over you. Not a comeback, not a clever reply, not a long paragraph explaining yourself. Just nothing. Continued, like they didn't even break your stride. Machiavelli understood that the greatest power a man can demonstrate is the power to absorb provocation without visibly reacting to it. He called it the quality of a lion who does not notice the dogs barking at its feet. Not because the lion is deaf, because the lion has decided the dogs are irrelevant. And that decision, that specific, conscious, deliberate decision about who is worth your energy and who is not, is the single most powerful thing you will ever do in any relationship, personal or professional, intimate or adversarial. You have spent years believing that responding meant you were strong, that defending yourself meant you had self-respect. But think about every single time you fired back, whether with words or tears or a paragraph sent at 2 a.m. Did you feel stronger after? Or did you feel exposed? Did you feel like you had won something? Or did you feel like you had handed them a window into every raw, unguarded part of you? Silence is not the absence of strength. Silence is strength choosing not to waste itself. The most powerful version of you is not the one who always has an answer. It is the one who looks at the provocation, feels it fully, and then turns around and keeps walking like the ground beneath them has never once felt unstable. Become that person. Walk away clean. Point 5. The day you stop explaining is the day you start becoming dangerous. There is a version of you that nobody has met yet. Not dangerous in the way that word usually gets used, not aggressive, not cold, not someone who walks around with something to prove. Dangerous in the way that a person becomes when they finally, completely, irreversibly stop needing anyone outside themselves to confirm that they are worthy of the space they occupy. That version of you does not explain, does not justify, does not soften the edges of their decisions to make other people more comfortable with choices that were never about those people to begin with. That version of you makes a move and keeps moving, gets misunderstood and keeps moving, gets talked about, gets doubted, gets questioned by people who haven't done a fraction of what you have done, and keeps moving. Not because they don't feel it, but because they have finally learned the difference between what deserves a response and what deserves their complete indifference. You know what changed for every person you have ever looked at and thought? There is something different about them. Something I cannot quite name, but I can feel. What changed was not their circumstances. It was not that life got easier for them, or that people started treating them better, or that they finally found the right words to explain themselves. What changed was that they stopped. They stopped the endless cycle of proving and defending and justifying. They stepped off that wheel completely. And once you step off that wheel, once you actually stop, you realize how much energy you were burning just to stay in place. Machiavelli wrote that the man who is always reacting is never leading. He is always one step behind the accusation, behind the assumption, behind the narrative that someone else started about him. The man who stops reacting stops following, and the man who stops following without announcing it, without making a speech about it, without explaining why, that man has just become the one setting the pace. That is the shift, that quiet, internal, seismic shift, where you go from being someone who responds to being someone who moves first, where you go from defending the life you have to building the life that makes the defense completely unnecessary. Because here is what nobody says out loud. When you are winning, genuinely winning, not performing it, but actually living it, nobody asks you to explain yourself. The results explain themselves. The energy explains itself. The way you walk into a room explains itself. You do not need to say a single word about who you are, because who you are is already visible in every choice you made when nobody was watching, every boundary you held when it cost you something, every moment you chose your own judgment over someone else's comfort. Stop explaining the painting while you are still painting it. Finish it. Let them see it when it is done, and say nothing. Point 6. You were never meant to be understood by everyone, and that is your power. This one is going to land differently, because this is the one you were never told. Not by your parents, not by school, not by anyone who sat you down and talked to you seriously about how the world actually works. Everyone around you growing up gave you the same invisible instruction. Make yourself understandable. Make yourself agreeable. Make yourself easy to read, easy to accept, easy to place inside the box that other people have already built and labeled and decided is the correct shape for a person to be. And you tried. For years you tried. You explained your personality. You explained your ambitions. You explained why you are the way you are, where it comes from, what it means. You made yourself a book that anyone could open and read and understand from cover to cover. You thought transparency was the same thing as connection. But the most extraordinary people who have ever lived were not understood by their contemporaries, not even close. They were called strange, called difficult, called arrogant, called threatening, called every name that people reach for when they encounter someone they cannot easily categorize. And those people, the ones doing the labeling, were not wrong because they were stupid. They were wrong because they were measuring something unprecedented with a ruler built for ordinary things. You cannot measure a river with a tape measure designed for walls. Machiavelli himself died misunderstood. The man who wrote the most honest, unflinching account of how power actually operates spent the last years of his life in exile, dismissed, reduced. The very ideas that would influence centuries of political thought were called sinister in his lifetime. He was not vindicated by the people around him. He was vindicated by time, by the long, patient, irrefutable verdict of history. You do not need the people in the room to understand you. You need the courage to keep going without their understanding. There are people in your life right now, people who know you, who have a version of you in their head that is wrong. Completely, fundamentally wrong. They have taken a few moments, a few words, a few decisions, and built an entire portrait of you from those fragments. And that portrait looks nothing like you. Nothing like what you feel when you are alone. Nothing like what drives you. Nothing like the fullness of who you actually are. And you have been exhausting yourself trying to correct that portrait, trying to pull them closer to the real image. But here is the thing about people who are holding the wrong portrait. They are not confused. They are comfortable. Their version of you is manageable. Their version of you fits. The real version of you, the full, unedited, unexplained version, is too much for them. Good. Be too much. Stop editing yourself down to a size that people with limited vision can handle. The right people will not need you to explain the painting. They will just stand in front of it and feel it. Be that painting. So here we are. 6 points. 6 moments you have lived inside your own life. 6 feelings you carried around without a name for them, without language for them, without anyone ever sitting across from you and saying, yes, that happened, that was real, and it cost you something. You have spent a significant portion of your life in a courtroom that you built yourself, showing up daily to stand trial for who you are, preparing your defense every morning before you even walked out the door, anticipating the questions, rehearsing the answers, calibrating your words to land softly enough that nobody would find them threatening and clearly enough that nobody could misread them. And you did all of that labor. All of that invisible, exhausting daily labor. And the verdict never changed. Because the verdict was never the point. The point was keeping you busy, keeping you focused outward, keeping you perpetually one explanation away from finally feeling okay about yourself, about your choices, about the life you are building in a direction that not everyone around you is going to be able to follow. Machiavelli wrote that the strongest fortress a man can have is the goodwill of his own people. But the strongest fortress a person can have, the kind no enemy can siege and no doubt can penetrate, is an unshakable knowledge of their own worth that was built in private, tested in silence, and requires no announcement. You are building that fortress right now, every time you choose not to explain, every time you let the silence stand, every time you walk away from a conversation that was designed to diminish you and you leave it not with the last word, but with your dignity completely intact, you are adding another stone to that wall. Nobody is getting through that wall. Not their opinions, not their misunderstandings, not their need to have you smaller and quieter and more manageable than you actually are. You are done managing yourself for other people's comfort. You are done